I left Albuquerque on Christmas morning, heading south along the bosques of the Rio Grande. Cranes were migrating up the river, sleeping on its banks like me, but traveling so much faster and so much more elegantly. Human migrants passing through here traditionally favored Route 66, the major road from Chicago to Los Angeles from the Great Depression through the 1950s. The route originated a century earlier as part of a pre-Civil War army project testing the suitability of camels as pack animals, but it became famous as the road to California for the millions heading west in the mid-20th century. It was also one of the first highways used for mass automobile tourism, launching an age of road trips and easy riders and inspiring the blues hit Get Your Kicks on Route 66. This is the highway where crossing the West turned from a hardship to a holiday. That's not to say things can't still get pretty confusing, though, especially for pedestrians.
Right now, I'm on the east side of the Rio Grande, just across from the town of Belén. And I've got a navigation puzzle. There's a stretch of about 130 miles between here and the small town of Truth or Consequences that I don't know how to cross. Interstate 25 is a no-go. I can't walk on that. I could be in for some real trouble.
After a series of calls to the Department of Transportation and the Army, it turned out my only option actually was to walk down the controlled access freeway. Normally, that would be illegal. But here, everything else belonged either to a tribe or to the military. On the one hand, it was a relief to find out my trip wasn't suddenly over. On the other hand, my contact at the DOT warned me that walking the interstate was, quote, gonna suck.
Despite having a lot of mesh open on the tent during the night, and despite it being a very mild night, all in all, once again my breath is condensed all over the inside of this thing and then frozen. So now that I'm trying to get packed up, every time I move, a little bit more ice falls down and immediately starts melting over whatever it touches, which is mostly the sleeping bag, given how big the sleeping bag is. So the sleeping bag is going to get stored wet. All the other bedding is going to get stored wet. The inside of the tent's going to get wet. Tonight, when I unpack everything is going to be wet. It's going to be cold again tonight. My breath is going to condense and freeze again tonight. Everything's just going to keep getting wetter until I can finally get indoors and spread everything out to dry. And I don't know when that's going to be.
I did make one last effort to see if I could follow an abandoned side road through the desert, but this dead-ended in an RV park run by a couple of heavily armed anti-government Alabamans. It wasn't happening. Walking along the interstate with its high-speed traffic actually turned out to be surprisingly stress-free, except for my limited ability to get off the road once I was on it. The shoulders were nice and wide for once. I even got an escort from a state trooper. If anything, stepping off the blacktop was the risky part.
This thing just went right through my shoe. Wow, that'll wake you up. This may not look like much, but this is actually a point of extreme stupidity. It turned out that overpass a few miles back, heading off to the east, that I thought was relieving me of so much meddlesome traffic, was actually the main road. And the road that I'm on, despite being right next to the interstate, actually goes absolutely nowhere. So I can either backtrack a few miles and then make good a few miles and in the process lose a few hours, or I can make like a moose and get on the other side of this barbed wire fence. This is actually the first place that I've been through in a while that felt like a nice place.
Oh, the irony. Maybe this would be a good time to chill for a moment and think about history.
Okay, to the southeast, on the other side of that mountain, is what was formerly one of the most ill-reputed and notorious stretches of the Camino Real de Tierra Adentro. That is, the royal way to the lands within. I've spent the last 2,000 and more miles in the land within, and I am now heading toward the land without. But for hundreds of years, people traveling between Mexico City and Santa Fe largely relied on the Rio Grande because the Rio Grande is the river for this whole stretch of country. The problem is that for a stretch of about 120 miles south of here, the river valley goes through terrain so rough and over ground so unstable that the heavy wagons that were being used to ferry cargo between the two towns couldn't handle the passage. So instead, the muleteers and the ox drivers and the caravans struck eastward of here and made a shortcut across 90 miles of an enclosed and near waterless basin on the far side of that mountain. These caravans could only travel about 10 miles a day. So those 90 miles were the scene of much hardship, privation, and death. And it won that stretch of the Camino Real the name of La Jornada del Muerto, the journey of the dead man. I've gotten myself into kind of an unpleasant situation here. I'm currently on Highway 1 going through the Bosque del Apache Wildlife Refuge. Camping is illegal. It'll take me until late tonight to get clear on top of a full day. And the twist of the knife in the wound is that at the north end of the refuge, there's an RV park, the Bosque Birdwatchers RV Park. And the owner told me I could put my tent there for $15. So it was kind of a question of walking 15 miles or paying $15. And I've got to make sure that I handle it, because if the cost in Thornbrush country is that then I can't put up my tent because I can't turn on my light, because I can't give away my position, because somebody will come looking for me, then I might have to keep walking all night, and then all day. Or at any rate, until I'm so absolutely shot that I can't keep walking and I have to check in a motel, which would be at least twice what the guy back at the RV park was asking. About the only good I can see coming out of having to walk tonight is that I've been having a hard time sleeping through the nights because they're getting so long. Something's lighting the clouds way down south. Across the river valley there, that large mesa is the Mesa del Contadero, and that was the turning point when people traveling the Jornada del Muerto knew that they'd come out of the 90 miles of barrenness and could get back to the river. Contadero means counting place. And on the one hand, the story is that the counting place was a narrow ravine through which all the people and baggage and the animals had to pass in a single file line. On the other hand, after coming out of the Jornada del Muerto, you can just as easily imagine that it was the place where the people took stock to see what they were left with. It's a little bit wacky walking along this frontage road, the old highway, right next to Interstate 25. Because for the interstate, they've cut into all the highs and they've filled in all the lows. So the road runs along nice and smooth. Well, with the old road, they weren't having any of that nonsense. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down. It's like being on waves on the ocean. Just stopped in at that truck stop for some coconut pineapple juice and a cheese Danish. And the owner said he's been there 29 years. It used to be people were coming by all the time riding horses on their way to Washington, D.C. I've seen a lot of cross-country bicyclists as well. A bunch of people going between Mexico and Canada on Harley-Davidson motorcycles. And people walking. But it's been a long, long while since he's seen anyone on a horse. He said usually it was just a person riding a horse. No backup, no pack animal. He said it was a terrible idea. He thought it was cruel. I told him a lot of people have been asking me why I'm not traveling with a dog, and it's the same reason. It's one thing to take care of yourself, it's another thing to take care of an animal. And he said, well, if you're traveling with a horse or a dog, you know what you're doing, but they don't really have a choice. And if they did, they'd probably just as soon not be doing it. This is not a sane country to be traveling so far in. This is not a comfortable way of living. Bridges make such a huge difference. You can imagine trying to guide a cargo wagon pulled by a team of oxen across this arroyo without a bridge, without the resources of the time to even build a ramp out of rubble and packed earth down the thing. You'd lose a whole day trying to figure out how to get around this. So the night before last, I was camped on a slope, went kind of far down at the toes. I was doing this upward shimmy all night. And then last night, I wound up camping in a kind of fold in a small dry stream bed. And for some reason, I actually had a dream of intense vertigo. I've never had actual vertigo, but in the dream I was perched up on top of this tall stone spire, and everything below me was swimming in this kind of pendulous way, backward and forward and side to side. And then that was succeeded by a dream in which I was accosted by a Brazilian or possibly Burundian weasel dog, and I can still see its snapping teeth and its soulful eyes. At any rate, I'm really looking forward to taking a shower and sleeping on something flat.
Truth or Consequences. The name has a dire Old West ring to it, but it's actually taken from a 1950s radio game show. The host offered to produce one episode in the friendliest town to change its name to the name of the program, and the New Mexico spa town formerly known as Hot Springs won. These days, one of the local hotels is owned by the media mogul and land baron Ted Turner, who accordingly gets to count this man as one of his many neighbors. It's pretty much the quintessential Western community, right up to the spaceport being built at taxpayer expense to support the private ambitions of Richard Branson and Elon Musk. While the town's orbital rocket flights have yet to get off the ground, it does have a working air ambulance. I talked with pilot Tyler Wilkins and paramedic Fred Rubush about their work getting people in remote places to emergency medical care.
This hospital is small, it's limited in their capability. They don't have specialists, they don't have cardiologists, they don't have neurologists. So if a patient comes in with a stroke or a heart attack and they need a specialty care, those patients have to go to Phoenix or Albuquerque, El Paso, where they have those specialties. Having the helicopter right here, we can put the patient in and have the patient to Las Cruces, say in 30 minutes, where by ground it would take an hour.
Yeah. When did the helicopter get here? When did that become an
Here
option?
just over 2 years.
This aircraft we're flying, the Goose 119, it doesn't do very well in hot temperatures. Every aircraft is going to do worse in hot and humid conditions, but
Why is that?
it's the density of the air. It produces less lift, so you have to basically take weight off the aircraft to make it still do the same performance.
Is that like fuel?
Yeah, that's really what the only thing we can take off. And how heavy of a passenger can we take?
We took a 400-pound patient one day. But then I've also seen days when it was really hot that we got told that we couldn't take more than a 100-pound patient.
From getting the call, through making the decisions and grabbing the gear and getting to the helicopter, how long does it take to be in the air?
They light us in the air in 15 minutes.
And there's other factors like There's a big military restricted area to the east of here. Before you just go flying through there, you got to check with somebody, and that can take some time.
They shoot missiles from Nevada and they hit here, or they shoot missiles from here to Nevada. So you don't want to be cruising through there and have a missile take you out.
Yeah. What kind of cost is associated with a flight?
But I've been told a basic flight with not a whole lot of stuff going on is around $20,000 to $22,000 from here to, say, El Paso.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a 40-minute flight.
An hour in the air would cost a patient about 2 years' full-time income at New Mexico's minimum wage. And that's not even counting any special procedures the crew might need to perform to keep that patient alive until they reach their destination. It's not a flight you want to have to take. But in the middle of the desert, there aren't a lot of options.
This little point here is where we are. This is Truth or Consequences Airport, and we have a fuel bowser there where we can get fuel. That's another thing here in New Mexico. There's really not a lot of places to get fuel. El Paso, of course, this is a pretty good-sized metropolitan area. Over 500,000 people live in this general area. We would never take patients to any of these small places, Alamogordo, Silver City. We'd always pick up a patient, and then we would either take them to Las Cruces or El Paso. This is the restricted area I was talking about. This whole area here. North, you get Socorro, all the way up to Albuquerque, and we take a lot of patients to Albuquerque. You go up to Santa Fe, and then Taos, and then you're into Colorado. It seems like they're trying to strategically locate a helicopter within 30 minutes of anywhere in the state. So no matter what happens anywhere in New Mexico, within 30 minutes a helicopter would be able to come and get you.
Wilkins came to Truth or Consequences after a wide variety of piloting jobs around the U.S. and in the Middle East, while Rubish is a New Mexico native and has always lived in small towns. Both have a strong sense of what it means to live in the West, and a deep appreciation for the perspective their work gives them on their surroundings.
I did tours in the Grand Canyon, the south rim of the Grand Canyon, then out of Vegas for a few years, and that was good. It was interesting. And then I did logging in a big aircraft for a company called Croman in Oregon, and we did firefighting and logging. Oh, I forgot, I did also do a year and a half, 2 years in Alaska, which was, I think that's like the epitome of why you learn to fly why I learned to fly a helicopter. I mean, you're out there just flying around, you see the grizzlies, and you can land almost anywhere, you're not talking to anybody, and it's just, yeah, it's just like the Wild West with a helicopter. You're just flying around, just doing your own thing. I really have an appreciation for the West. I have appreciation that there's still a mentality. I think you can feel it here in New Mexico. You can feel it in Alaska. You can feel it in Idaho. Just that I can do it, independent, we're gonna make our way, I mean, I think that spirit of like the pioneers coming across is still pretty relevant in the West, in our hearts and our minds, of like, give me my job, let me do it, leave me alone. Not that that's always a good attitude to have, but they're gonna have a real fight if they start trying to take people's guns away out here.
And small town living is definitely different than living in the city. In the past, I lived in a little small company town, only 200 houses. The closest grocery store was 60 miles away.
Dude, I think flying over you can really see the distances,
Oh look, there's a light out there. I wonder what that is. Because it's the only light that you can see for 100 miles in any direction.
I mean, you could imagine 200 years ago when like Billy the Kid's out running around on his horse and stuff, because not really that much has changed.
No.
I mean, you've got towns that have grown up a little bit, but I mean, 5 minutes you're out of the town, and it's just like it was when, everybody was riding around on horses and the Indians were running around.
My family moved to this part of the country in 1906.
Yeah.
My grandfather moved to Denver in 1906. He was a baby. But he lived here before New Mexico was even a state. And that, you talk about things that are significant in my in my job, I've always liked transporting old people. You know, like these 80, 90-year-old people, because if they're not really that sick and you can get them talking about their history of moving here, you know, they've got to see all of this stuff in their lifetime. You know, they've got to see the going from riding around in a wagon to automobiles and planes and the jet age and seeing people land on the moon and all this stuff. You want to find out like the history of travel, man, they've got to see it all.
Afterwards, over some cake in the kitchen, the helicopter mechanic told me about the time he was almost eaten by a werewolf in Portugal. A couple of days later, the evening news out of Albuquerque included a note that the station had just gotten its own helicopter back in the air after someone riddled it with a shotgun. And that's how we rang in the new year.